Hey, it's Kim Howerton here with a little protein focaccia. I've become obsessed with this bread. Hopefully you enjoy it. You can make it sweet, you can make it savory. So here are the ingredients that someone would want if they were making the savory version. Water, egg white protein powder, just plain egg whites. Then we've got cream of tartar, some spices and allulose, and a casein and whey blend protein powder. I'll show you the brand. And then some eggs that we're going to beat up before we throw them in. So this is for the savory. In the spices, you can do a bunch of different spice combinations. I'll give you a list of some different ones you could use, but you do have to include at least a small amount of allulose or else the texture is wonky. I'll show you what that looks like later so you can make your own informed decision. Now, if you want to make the sweet version, you just sub out for the plain casein and whey a packet of Keto Chow. Choose whatever flavor you like. They all pretty much work, at least the ones I've tried so far. And you can think if it would be good as a pancake flavor, it would probably be good as this little cake flavor. So you're just, instead of using the unflavored casein and savory spices, you're going to use flavored Keto Chow or a dairy whey protein. I'm sorry, a dairy protein or a casein whey protein, same thing. And sweet spices, you could do cinnamon, things like that. And you definitely will want some allulose in this case as well. But for this version, we are doing the savory. So most of that action happens over here at my mixer. We're going to start with the water. And then on top of that water, we're going to put in the plain egg white protein there. And then I'm going to add a little shaky shake of cream of tartar. Start the machine on low to incorporate the powder without tossing it all up in the air. Then slowly turn that up until we're at full speed. So once we're at full speed, we just keep letting that beat. It's going to take a while, probably around 5 minutes. I hope you realize this footage is sped up. This is not real time, but we're going to do this until we get it nice and fluffy, and it's going to be a lot more voluminous. This will grow. So bear with me. We'll get there in a moment. Okay, this part isn't that exciting, but I think it's kind of interesting. You can see that it's growing. You can see that there's more. It's the line of the batter is getting higher and higher and higher here. So this is sped up a lot. But about 5-6 minutes is the time it took in real time for it to transform into this. So now we slow it down to low and add in the seasonings, the spices, and the whey casein blend. Turn it back up a bit to incorporate that powder and the spices and things. And then add in beaten eggs, the 3 beaten eggs that we had. And that we're not turning it up all the way again, but we're turning up a little bit because, again, we want to mix those eggs in, but being aware that the fat in those yolks are going to cause defluffing. So we don't want to do it too much. So now I've got it off the mixer. You can see it's a really nice consistency, and what I'm doing here is swirling around and underneath because sometimes the egg yolks aren't fully incorporated. So you can see sort of in the bottom of that bowl there's a little bit of darker egg yolk area. So I'm just mixing that through with sort of a folding motion, again wanting to retain as much air in this batter as possible. It's obviously not as airy as if it were just egg whites. However, that is not as tasty or as nice a texture in my opinion, so the egg yolks definitely are an important addition. Once it looks good, I'm going to take out my baking sheet. It's a 1/4 baking sheet. Put some parchment on that, and then just put that batter in and smooth out the top. If I'm using fresh rosemary, I'll often put a sprig across the top. It looks very pretty. I'm going to bake it about 23 minutes at 325. When it's done, it looks like that. It gets pretty puffed up. Sometimes you get like a crack like that. Not usually, but sometimes. And you can see that it's very puffy, and that will deflate after a few minutes, which you see right there. It doesn't deflate much, but it deflates a little bit on the top. And then once it's cool, I am ready to slice it up. You want to use a bread knife, and just if there are any edges that look a little weird, just pop them off. You're going to use a bread knife, but you're going to cut this really gently because you want to make sure you don't tear the surface. So I just mark off what appear to be about 6 even slices, so 3 across and then 2 down. No, 3 down and 2 across. So you've got 6 approximate squares, and just doing it carefully so you don't, again, rip the little skin. Not a big deal if you do, but just gently cut that. I found though that a bread knife is your best bet, or a serrated knife. A straight knife just squishes too much. So just using this little bread knife and making approximately 6 even slices. And then they make perfect size sandwiches for using it as like sandwich bread. So once I've got those cut, I can kind of carefully peel them away from the parchment, and you can see it's a nice fluffy slice, nice cooked sides, a really nice texture. It doesn't leave any residue on my hands. Here you can see a slice I made without the allulose. So remember how I said the allulose was really important? You can see the surface doesn't get that nice browning. The top, you can see some of it peeled off. It's sticky. It doesn't have anywhere near as good a texture. So it still works as bread. So if you're really opposed to allulose, you can still use it. You can still make it. It's just not very pleasant to handle. And it looks a little fluffier, the version I made recently, but some of that might be just storage because it's been in the fridge overnight, the version without the allulose. So anyway, but I prefer it this way. So what I'm going to do is cut it into 6 slices, and that's how I store it. I just stack them up and put it in a Tupperware, and they're great. But when I'm ready to use it, if I'm using it as a sandwich, when I'm ready for that sandwich, I just cut it down the center. And so then I've got 2 thinner pieces of bread to use for either side of my sandwich. Very easy to use, very simple, easy to store. And you can see that it is nice and moist on the inside, but nice and firm on the outside. If you want it a little less moist, you can toast it. And it's not like a crispy outside it gets, but that allulose does crisp a little bit, at least while it's still on the warm side. If it had sat for very long, it's not going to stay super crispy. Alternatively, here I'm showing you that you can cut it into like breadsticks if you want to use it as a dipper, like you wanted to dip it in olive oil, like little breadsticks, like soft breadsticks, like focaccia. Don't mistake that I mean like crunchy breadsticks. And so this also, if you made this sweet version, cutting them up like this makes for a little, what I'd call sort of a pancake bake dipper. You can dip in little syrups. So different ways that I cut it up when I'm ready to use it. Okay, with the magic of film, this is a sweet version I'm going to show you now. Notice it looks a little bit different. I do notice the texture when using Keto Chow is a little bit softer. The surface doesn't get as firm as when I'm using the unflavored casein and whey blend. Both wonderful, not suggesting either is bad, but it's kind of interesting because in a sweet version, having this softer top is not a problem at all because I am not using it as sandwich bread, though you could still use it as sandwich bread because you can see it's still nice and fluffy, and it's still not sticky on the surface. It's just a little less hardened. It's just a super subtle texture difference. But here you can see this is a version I made of the sweet variety. Okay, real quick, because you probably want to know, this is the brand I use for the Savory casein and whey blend protein powder, PEScience Select. It's unflavored, multi-purpose protein, and very helpful to have on hand. I recommend you have some. Because it looks so pretty, this is a version I made with fresh rosemary. You can see I throw a fresh rosemary sprig on top, and that's what it looks like after it cools. Obviously, remove the sprig before cutting it up. And here I'm just showing you some pictures of some different ways I've served both the sweet or the savory. And the nice thing about it being a high protein bread, very low carb bread, is that you can change the macros on it by adding more fat, like mayonnaise on a sandwich or bacon or a topping or butter or whatever. And it gives you that important protein bump that many of us need in our day. So it's very flexible on any style of low carb diet, either a higher protein, more moderate fat, or even a higher fat, moderate protein. It will work in any direction. That's it. Enjoy your fluffy bread.